He had everything: a life people envied, wealth others only dreamed of, and a future that seemed untouchable. But when he decided to put love to the ultimate test, what started as a game of trust spiraled into something far darker. Behind the closed doors of privilege, hidden truths about loyalty, greed, and the ugly face of prejudice began to surface. And in the end, the person he thought he knew best would reveal a side he never imagined. The question is, was he ready to face it? Before the world knew his name, Marcus Williams lived a life many could only dream of. At 35, he was a self-made millionaire who had built his empire from the ground up. Born into a working-class black family in the heart of Atlanta, Marcus knew the taste of struggle long before he savored success. His parents had juggled 2, sometimes 3, jobs to keep food on the table, and from a young age, he absorbed the lessons of perseverance, resilience, and dignity in the face of hardship. By the time his peers were just learning how to navigate their careers, Marcus had already taken bold steps into the business world. He invested in real estate, built a chain of fitness centers, and soon became known as a man whose vision seemed limitless. Yet despite the luxury cars, the sprawling penthouse, and the admiration of colleagues, Marcus never forgot where he came from. His wealth, to him, wasn't just a symbol of success. It was a reminder of battles fought and won against a society that had doubted him every step of the way. But wealth could not fill the void of companionship. For years, Marcus had remained cautious with relationships. He had witnessed firsthand how money could twist intentions, how people smiled at his face but whispered about his bank account. Trust was not something he gave easily. And so when he met Vanessa, a strikingly beautiful woman with charm and grace, he allowed himself to believe, just for once, that perhaps love had found him at last. Vanessa entered his life like a spark in the dark. She wasn't just gorgeous. She was charismatic, attentive, and seemed genuinely interested in Marcus as a person, not as a figure on a magazine cover or a bank statement. She laughed at his corny jokes, asked about his childhood, and listened with admiration to the stories of his parents' sacrifices. Slowly, she began to dissolve the walls Marcus had built around his heart. For the first time in years, he imagined a future that wasn't just about business deals and investments, but about family, love, and legacy. Yet, deep down, a shadow of doubt lingered. Marcus had seen too many friends betrayed by people they thought they could trust. He had witnessed how money could attract love, but also envy, greed, and hidden agendas. And while Vanessa gave him no obvious reason to suspect anything, Marcus could not shake the nagging question: did she love him for who he was, or for what he had? That question consumed him quietly. It followed him during late-night drives through the city, haunted him when he lay awake in his penthouse, and whispered in his mind whenever Vanessa's eyes sparkled at the sight of his lifestyle. To many, he appeared to be a man in control, but beneath the surface, Marcus wrestled with uncertainty. It was during one of these restless nights that an idea began to take shape: a test. A way to discover the truth. It would be bold, unconventional, and risky. But Marcus was not a man who shied away from challenges. If Vanessa truly loved him, she would prove it not when life was glamorous, but when it was stripped of comfort. What Marcus didn't realize, however, was that this decision would set in motion a chain of events that would reveal more than just the truth about Vanessa. It would expose deeply buried prejudices, challenge the limits of trust, and unravel a story far greater than he ever imagined. Because when you're black, wealthy, and successful in a world that still clings to silent biases, love isn't the only thing tested. For now, though, Marcus remained unaware of the storm gathering ahead. To the outside world, he was simply a man in love, planning a life with the woman who had captured his heart. But behind the smiles, the lavish dinners, and the public displays of affection, the seeds of doubt had already been planted. And soon they would grow into something he could no longer control. As the days passed, Marcus began quietly preparing his test. He told no one of his plan, not his closest friends nor his family. This was his secret, a private mission to uncover the truth. And though his intentions came from a place of self-protection, the outcome would be anything but predictable. Because sometimes when you go searching for answers, you discover truths you were never prepared to face. And for Marcus Williams, the truth would not just break his heart, it would shake the very foundation of his world. Marcus's plan took shape with quiet precision. He told Vanessa that he would be traveling for business and would be unreachable for several weeks. In reality, he arranged something far different. He would disappear into a carefully staged life where wealth and privilege were stripped away. A trusted doctor, one of the few confidants in his circle, helped craft the illusion. The story was simple yet devastating. Marcus had suffered an accident that left him partially paralyzed, confined to a wheelchair, his businesses left in the hands of managers, and his lavish lifestyle paused indefinitely. When Vanessa was brought to see him in the hospital for the first time, Marcus studied her reaction carefully. At first, she appeared concerned, her eyes widening in shock as she took in the sight of him sitting frail, motionless and dependent. She touched his hand, whispered words of comfort, and promised she would stay by his side. For a moment, Marcus dared to believe she meant it. But over the days that followed, cracks began to form. She grew distant, her visits shorter, her patience thinner. She sighed when nurses asked her to help with small tasks, hesitated before touching him, and seemed restless in the sterile, white hospital room. The woman who once laughed freely at his jokes now forced smiles, her gaze often wandering to her phone, scrolling through photos of parties, vacations, and designer outfits. Marcus noticed it all, every flicker of irritation, every moment she wished to be anywhere but here. But it wasn't just Vanessa's change that pierced him. Outside the walls of his staged confinement, Marcus began to see how differently the world treated him when his wealth was hidden. Suddenly, he was no longer the powerful entrepreneur stepping out of a luxury car. He was just another black man, vulnerable, silenced, and underestimated. Hospital staff spoke over him instead of to him, as if his chair stripped him of intelligence. Security guards eyed him with suspicion when he lingered in the lobby too long, their expressions sharp and unwelcoming. Even in moments where he tried to exercise independence, maneuvering his chair alone or requesting specific care, he was met with impatience, dismissive tones, or outright neglect. And Vanessa noticed none of it. Or worse, she ignored it. Her true colors began to surface during a dinner with friends she had invited into Marcus's home. They laughed, drank, and reminisced about glamorous nights while Marcus sat quietly observing. One of Vanessa's friends, with a careless chuckle, remarked that at least now Vanessa didn't have to worry about all the women throwing themselves at him anymore. The table laughed, except Marcus. He watched as Vanessa smirked, saying nothing to defend him, nothing to push back against the demeaning undertone. That night, when the guests had left, Marcus overheard her on the phone. Her voice, once filled with tenderness, carried a sharp edge. She complained about how exhausting it was to take care of him, how different life felt without the luxury, and how maybe this wasn't the future she wanted. Each word cut deeper than any physical injury could have. Still, Marcus held back. His test wasn't complete. He needed to see how far the truth would go. Weeks turned into months, and Vanessa's mask slipped further. She began missing entire days without explanation, returning with excuses that felt paper thin. Sometimes she came home with shopping bags, flaunting new clothes and accessories Marcus knew he hadn't purchased. When he gently asked about their finances, she brushed him off, her tone laced with irritation. But the breaking point came on a rainy afternoon. Marcus had asked Vanessa to accompany him to a therapy session. Instead, she dropped him off at the entrance, muttering about errands she had to run. Left alone, Marcus struggled to maneuver his chair across the slick pavement. As he tried to enter the building, two men in suits blocked his path. They demanded to see identification, questioning whether he belonged there at all. Marcus explained calmly that he was a patient, but their suspicion only grew sharper. One muttered under his breath about another scammer trying to take advantage of the system. For Marcus, it wasn't just the humiliation of being treated like an intruder. It was the realization that his wealth had once shielded him from the full brunt of such prejudice. Now, stripped of that protection, he felt the weight of a reality too familiar to countless others. When Vanessa returned hours later, laughing on the phone as she pulled up in Marcus's car, he sat drenched in silence, his heart heavier than ever. She didn't even notice his soaked clothes until he pointed it out. Her response was not concern, but annoyance, as though his discomfort was an inconvenience to her. By then, Marcus had his answer. The woman he had once believed might be his partner for life had revealed a truth more painful than betrayal, and the world around him in those months of staged weakness had shown him how quickly respect could vanish when privilege was stripped away. But what Marcus didn't know yet was that the darkest revelation was still to come. Because Vanessa was hiding more than impatience, more than greed, her secret would shatter everything and test Marcus's strength in ways even he could not have imagined. The storm Marcus had sensed was finally breaking. What began as whispers of doubt had now grown into a roar of undeniable truth. Vanessa's absence grew longer, her excuses thinner and her temper sharper. But Marcus, ever the strategist, didn't confront her immediately. He waited, he observed, and then he discovered what shattered him completely. One evening, while Vanessa was out, Marcus's assistant visited quietly, dropping off financial documents he had requested. What Marcus saw made his stomach twist. Unauthorized withdrawals, extravagant charges, even property papers shifting subtly into Vanessa's name. She wasn't just growing distant, she was siphoning his fortune away piece by piece, preparing for a future without him, and yet, betrayal wasn't the worst of it. The breaking point came at a high-profile charity gala, an event Marcus had once proudly hosted, now attending in his staged condition. He had invited Vanessa, hoping her presence would tell him all he needed to know in one final moment. Dressed in shimmering gold, she walked beside him with a smile that seemed painted on. But as soon as they entered the grand hall, Marcus could feel the shift. The room full of elites, people who had once shaken his hand eagerly, toasted his success and praised his vision, now barely noticed him. Stripped of his aura of wealth, confined to a chair, he was no longer the man they revered. Eyes slid past him, conversation stalled awkwardly when he approached, and in the corner of the room, he overheard murmurs. Sad, isn't it? But you know, people like him don't usually keep success for long. The words sliced through him. People like him. It wasn't his accident they referred to, it was his race. The mask of polite society had cracked, and beneath it, the prejudice still lived. His fortune had once insulated him from their whispers, but now, with his power seemingly diminished, the truth spilled freely. Vanessa, standing right beside him, laughed nervously at their comments, making no effort to defend him. Instead, she leaned closer to one of the men, her smile more genuine than anything Marcus had seen from her in weeks. In that moment, the truth wasn't just betrayal, it was exposure. Humiliation followed quickly. During the dinner, a server bypassed Marcus's request for a glass of water, addressing Vanessa instead as if Marcus were invisible. When he repeated himself, the server finally turned, rolling his eyes in irritation, muttering something under his breath Marcus barely caught, always demanding. Vanessa chuckled awkwardly, whispering to Marcus not to make a scene. The air tightened around him. He felt the weight of centuries of dismissal, every subtle cruelty carried by those who believed his value was tied only to money and status. He had built an empire, fought through barriers designed to keep him out, and yet here he was, treated as though his humanity itself was negotiable. And then came the moment that turned the night into an eruption. As the charity auction began, Vanessa excused herself to mingle. Marcus wheeled himself toward the front, hoping to reclaim a shred of dignity by bidding on a piece of art. When he raised his card, the auctioneer hesitated. Then, with a patronizing smile, he announced loudly, "Sir, this item may be beyond your means at the moment." The room erupted in polite laughter. Polite but poisonous. Marcus froze, his chest tightening, shame burning through him. Vanessa didn't defend him, didn't correct the insult, didn't even look his way. She stood with her back turned, laughing freely with a group of men in tailored suits. To her, in that moment, he was no longer her partner. He was a burden, a shadow, a man she had already discarded in her mind. That humiliation should have crushed him. Instead, it sparked something else. The fire that had driven him from poverty to power roared back to life. This was the test he had designed, but its outcome had grown bigger than love, bigger than Vanessa, bigger than betrayal. It wasn't just about whether she loved him for who he was. It was about the world that still looked at him and saw less. A world where wealth could buy silence but not respect. Marcus had heard enough. With deliberate force, he maneuvered his chair to the center of the stage. The room fell silent as he spoke, his voice steady but trembling with fury. "For years," he began, "you celebrated me when I was powerful. You shook my hand, praised my name, and smiled at my wealth. But the moment I appeared weak, you turned away. And worse, you revealed what you really think. Not of my success, not of my accident, but of my skin. Gasps rippled across the hall. Vanessa's face paled, her mask cracking at last. Marcus paused, his gaze sweeping across the audience. Tonight isn't about me anymore. It's about what I see in this room, in your eyes and your laughter. Strip away money, strip away privilege, and you've shown me the truth. And the truth is ugly. Silence thickened. Vanessa stepped forward, her lips parting, but Marcus raised a hand, silencing her. For the first time, she seemed powerless. The moment stretched heavy and unbearable until Marcus spoke again, his words sharper, louder, unrelenting. I set out to test love. Instead, I uncovered hate. And the question I ask you all now, what do you really see when you look at me? A man? Or a lie you told yourself about what a black man could be? The room sat frozen. Eyes darted, whispers stirred, shame spread like fire. Vanessa shifted uncomfortably, but Marcus didn't glance her way. His test was over. The truth was clear. And yet what awaited him after this night would test him even further. Because when you speak truth to power, the world doesn't always listen quietly. Sometimes it fights back. The silence in the gala hall lingered long after Marcus's words faded into the air. For some, it was the first time they had been forced to confront the truth behind their polite smiles and shallow praise. For others, it was an uncomfortable reminder of what they had always known but refused to admit. That beneath wealth, status, and charm, the same prejudice that had once chained Marcus's ancestors still lingered in their own eyes. That night marked the end of Marcus's engagement with Vanessa. She tried to justify herself with excuses about stress, about pressure, about not knowing how to cope, but Marcus no longer needed her words. Her silence when he needed her most had said everything. The woman he once believed was his partner for life had revealed herself to be no partner at all. Ending things wasn't easy. For a man who had built his life on trust in numbers and contracts, letting go of the illusion of love cut deeper than any business loss. Yet walking away also gave Marcus something he hadn't felt in months: clarity. He had tested Vanessa's love and uncovered betrayal. But more importantly, he had exposed something far greater. The fragility of respect in a world where a black man's worth was too often measured, not by his humanity, but by his wealth. In the weeks that followed, Marcus reclaimed his strength. The accident was revealed as a test, a decision that shocked many and angered some. Critics accused him of manipulation, of staging deception for his own gain, but those who listened closely understood what he had truly uncovered. It wasn't just Vanessa's greed. It was society's prejudice, laid bare in the moments when they thought no one powerful was watching. He returned to his businesses with renewed purpose, but his empire no longer existed simply to grow profits. Marcus began investing in community programs, scholarships, and initiatives designed to protect and empower young black entrepreneurs who faced the same doubts and dismissals he once endured. He poured resources into mentorship programs, determined to ensure that others wouldn't have to prove their humanity the way he had. But the story didn't fade with time. News outlets picked it up, twisting it into sensational headlines. Millionaire fakes disability to test fiancée, as if the spectacle of deception mattered more than the truth it exposed. Social media buzzed, some mocking him, others praising his boldness. Yet beneath the noise, a deeper conversation began to stir. People started asking, why was a man's worth treated as disposable when stripped of wealth? Why did respect vanish so quickly when privilege was removed? And why did society still see a successful black man not as equal, but as exceptional, an anomaly rather than the norm? For Marcus, those questions mattered more than public opinion. They cut to the heart of what he had experienced. His wealth had bought him temporary insulation, but when it was gone, the truth of how the world saw him resurfaced with brutal clarity. It wasn't his chair that made people dismiss him. It was his blackness revealed in their tone, their hesitation, their laughter. The chair was simply the excuse, and so his story became bigger than his own heartbreak. It became a mirror, forcing others to see themselves. How many people watching his downfall at the gala had remained silent? How many had laughed politely instead of speaking up? How many had seen him as less because of the lies they carried in their own minds about what success should look like? The impact reached Marcus personally, too. He no longer sought validation from rooms filled with shallow applause. Instead, he found strength in the communities that had always lifted him, in the stories of resilience passed down through generations, and in the quiet knowledge that his life meant more than the approval of the privileged few. But the scars of that night lingered. Even after rebuilding, even after reclaiming his dignity, Marcus could not forget the sting of being dismissed in public, the humiliation of being reduced to nothing more than a stereotype. That memory followed him, fueling his mission but also reminding him of the fragile line between respect and rejection. And maybe that's the point, the lesson his story carries for all of us. Because Marcus's experience isn't isolated. It reflects a reality lived by countless others who don't have millions to shield them, who face those dismissals daily, without cameras, without headlines, without the chance to expose the truth in a grand hall. Racism doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. It hides in the side glances, in the lowered voices, in the jokes that sting but are dismissed as harmless. It hides in the silence of those who could speak up but choose not to. And too often it hides in the belief that wealth or success can erase it. Marcus's story proved what so many already knew. No amount of money can buy freedom from prejudice. So what do we take from this? We take the reminder that silence in the face of injustice is complicity, that love without loyalty is an illusion, that respect built on wealth is fragile and false, and that the measure of a person's worth must never be tied to status, privilege, or color of skin, but to the shared humanity we all carry. As Marcus looked back on his journey, he knew his story was no longer just about him. It was about us, about the choices we make every day, to dismiss or to defend, to ignore or to acknowledge, to remain silent or to speak. And so, I'll leave you with this: when the moment comes and you're faced with the chance to stand for someone who's being diminished, will you turn away, or will you speak the truth even when the room falls silent? Because in the end, the answer to that question doesn't just define them, it defines you.